I've been studying psychotherapy and Buddhism, so we can touch on that as well if you want. It's been
Yeah.
very
Let's touch on it now. Well, how long's it been? It's been like a few weeks you've been studying it, yeah?
yeah, we're up to week 4.
Week 4. And
Yeah.
how's it going?
Um, it's amazing. So it's all online, so it's a bit
Yeah.
different.
So
But
psychology through a Buddhist lens.
psychotherapy,
Right. Okay.
as I explain to clients, the difference between psychology and psychotherapy is that ology is study of, and psyche is the mind. So it's psychology is study of the mind. So there's so many fields of psychology, whereas psychotherapy is therapy of the mind. So
Mm.
there's many modalities of therapy that you can employ. So psychologists, I know a lot of them do therapy of the mind, um, but yeah, a lot of them also just do the study of them on how does the brain work and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff. So
Right.
yeah, so we're doing psychotherapy in Buddhism, and just looking at how mindfulness and Buddhist philosophy can be integrated into your approach. So obviously, been doing this for 2 years, just of my own volition. Um, and then I came across this course and I was like, yeah, you beauty. Other people are doing this. Yay, this is cool. So it's been great for me to pull my brain out and have it shaken and seeing what falls out. And I get to ask the amazing instructor, Dr. Tan. He's from Malaysia. He's actually a doctor, a medical doctor, but he's also a long history with Buddhism and now psychotherapy and everything. So tapping into that knowledge source has been amazing.
Wow.
But it's good to hear what you already know, but you're just
Yeah.
hearing a different term for it, or you're coming across all this stimulus and it challenges your belief system. And I guess this is what our clients do when they come into contact with us, and you get to sit there and reassess it and reevaluate it. And I'm finding a lot of it's too not psycho, but it's too convoluted. So I keep trying to simplify it as much as I can
Hmm.
because I'm trying to translate 2,500 years of philosophy to my clients. So I'm trying to be a bridge between that. So I'm taking it, I'm modifying a little bit. I'm tossing out what I don't need and just keeping what I do need. And
Yeah.
uh,
I think that's with anything to do with, working with the mind. It's like the more we can simplify things, the better, because you can get stuck down so many different rabbit holes and look at so many different studies and then look at all different translations of Buddhist Buddhist scriptures or whatever
mm,
other scriptures you're looking at. And yeah, like you said, it can get super convoluted and super complicated because, there are, if you look at, depending on which area of psychotherapy or psychology you're looking at, there'll be so many conflicting ideas that say
yeah.
one thing and then the other thing. And then people will be like, but hang on, I've heard this over here and I've heard this over here. And it's like, it makes a lot of people just want to throw it up in the air and go, fucked if I know. So if you can simplify things down a bit for people, it definitely helps.
Well, mindfulness. The Dr. Tan was calling it McMindfulness because it's all the rage these days. Everyone's trying to sell
Yeah.
mindfulness, and it's just awareness. That's all it is. It's just being aware and in the moment. Um, and yeah, you've got to do certain meditative practices to condition the mind to be present and to be aware. So um, yeah, it's been great just to be challenged, I guess, stimulated. Like we're talking today about how we're in such a society that's down to rushing and speeding, and how
Mm.
no one's got time. And I argued that we've all got the same time, but we've just lost our capacity to spend it.
Mm.
It's because we're in this, as we say all the time, we're in a state of deficiency. So we're creating this craving. I need more, so therefore I'm going to rush, and we end up being like speedboats skimming across the surface instead of just being on a lie low, and floating and paddling along and stopping and having a chat and really going for a swim, looking what's under the water. Oh, there's a turtle, there's a rock, deepening our experience.
It's like the reminds me of the doco that you put me onto, the My Octopus Teacher,
Yeah,
and he like instead of going, oh, I've seen this bit, now I'll go to this bit and this bit and this bit, he just
yeah.
got so familiar with that particular small part of the ocean that he kind of became part of it himself and had a very, very different experience.
Well, you and Mel are doing that. I did it when I went to Hua Hin. I decided, and I talked to my clients about this when I'm trying to educate them about being still and deep and being engaged instead of just consuming. And when I moved to Hua Hin, I purposely didn't hire a car or a scooter. I purchased a bicycle because I just wanted to take my time. I wanted to slow down. I wanted to stop and taste this or smell that or walk in and say hi. And, I've been back there 4 times now for work. And every time I go back, I'm just riding down the street and hear, hi, Nick. Hi, Nick. and I'm turning around, there's someone waving out of a shop or a little street store somewhere. And you wouldn't have had that if I was in a car or speeding past on a motorbike.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's a different experience. I literally wrote down a quote. I'm just going to pull it up on my phone here yesterday, and it's a Carl Jung quote. And this is often what people do, especially in our field of people who are, trying to get that. We talk about a lot, that next certificate or that next bit of knowledge and that kind of thing, and moving from one bit of knowledge to the next. And Carl Jung said, intellectualism is often a common cover-up for fear of direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was my reaction. I was like,
I heard something similar about intellectualizing is different. I can't remember the exact thing. Intellectualizing is one thing, but wisdom is another thing, and we're addicted to knowing.
Yeah,
we're addicted to intellectualizing,
which is essentially like that, like skimming across the water on the boat. It's like, let me see how many things I can touch on, how many different subjects I can sound interesting about without ever actually really diving down into a lot of them through direct experience.
So Bruce Lee's quote, I don't fear the man that's done 10,000 kicks once. I fear the man that's done one kick 10,000 times. Because that shit's going to hurt.
Yeah. I'm learning that with my Muay Thai training at the moment, right. Nico. Yeah, it's this guy, Dowdan is my master down there, and he's killing me, man. It's hard work,
especially in the humidity as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, when it gets to the afternoon before a lesson, I'm like, come on, be a little bit cloudy and windy, please.
Turn the fans on. No.
No,
we're not doing it. Hey, what are your thoughts on when people say, I can't believe it's Christmas already, I can't believe I'm 50 already, or I can't believe where's that time gone?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? What's happening there?
It's just there's so much for our consciousness to take in, that oftentimes we look at an area of our life, and normally it is to do with, it's Christmas already, or it's June already, or whatever the hell, or it's my birthday already. And it's like... so
we focus on the big bits, not all of the bits in between?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it is interesting. I do it as well sometimes. What month are we in? Yeah, I can't believe, I've been in Koh Samui for 8 months already. Like, it's just, but once again, it's weird to say that. I know that you'll say, because it is what it is. Like, you've been here for that time. Because then you'll have days. Because I'll have days or weeks that feel like a month. Like, this is why time is so funny. Like I'll have a day that feels like a week, or a week that feels like a month, but then all of a sudden I'll look back now and go, 8 months has gone like that. But during that 8 months, there was periods that felt like, much larger chunks of time.
So I hypothesize that most people are present once every couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so imagine there's 60 minutes in an hour. I'd say that people are probably present in general, in the busyness of their lives, maybe 10 to 20 times through that hour.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually present. Maybe not even. Maybe I'm being very generous.
I think you're being very generous.
I'm just trying to do the math, and I'm tired, so I'm probably being very generous. But when people ask me how often do I meditate, and I say, I live a very meditative life. I don't sit down and, I do a meditative practice. So I'll sit down and meditate as a practice, but that's just to condition my mind for out there. So it's like footy training on a Tuesday and Thursday night, but then I'll go and play the actual game and I'll perform out there. So I'd say I think I'm present in the moment. When I had that orange in the Vipassana retreat, I was in every fourth millisecond, perhaps.
Yeah, that was like a hyper presence kind of state.
Yeah, totally. And I sat next to a pond for 40 minutes and I just watched all the insects land on the water and leave. And it was amazing. I was like, oh, there's arising and cessation. There's coming, there's going, there's flow, but not once in that 40 minutes did I think, fuck, I'm bored. Because I was so engaged. I was so connected. I was so deep in that experience. And so, yeah, for me, I think if we can be more mindful during our day to day, if we can actually be present and connected and ground ourselves and stop and take a minute just to do 3 deep breaths every hour, we're forcing ourselves to slow down, set an alarm on your clock or something. I think there would be less people that say, I can't believe it's Christmas.
Yeah. So more consciousness, more presence. I like the analogy you use with sport, because with meditation, people get a bit obsessed with what meditation do you do? How long do you do it? What time of day do you do? What app do you use? And that kind of thing. And then they think that their time to be present is just when they're sitting on the pillow, right? But it's like you sit on the pillow in order for that to bleed into the rest of your life. So it's not so much just about being on the pillow. And I think with sport, like, you do the training, and then game day is the time that you think about things less, because like you've trained your body
in the moment,
because you're under, say there's more pressure, or say you're like playing in the AFL and there's a big crowd when there's crowds again. It's like you don't think, because you're kind of overwhelmed, but your body is trained in a certain way to act out certain movements. That's why people like Dustin Martin can snap these goals in a grand final, because his body's been trained so well that it just acts in that moment.
But then he doesn't walk around with an expectation that I should just be able to kick those goals. He conditions himself to do that. But most people are walking around with an expectation that they should be happy and they should feel calm, they should be present, but they're not turning up to training.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So it's this, that's why I think that's what there's this evolution. It's like people want to start this meditation practice, or they want to be more calm and that kind of thing. So you go and you set your time and your ritual and do that. But then that you got to be careful that doesn't become the escape. And this is the only time that I'm going to try and feel calm. And that can happen when people have a really nice experience as well in meditation. Like, you might have this moment where, you thoughts stop and you get like a visions or light show or something, or you have this incredible feeling of peace or calm. And that's akin to like the because I've worked with so many gambling addicts, right? It's like it's the classic. It's the person who went and played the poker machines for the first time and had a massive win. And then I'm like, they're hooked. So it was first time I went and I won $6,000. I'm like, oh no.
Oh no. Worse than that could have happened.
Yeah, it's the worst thing. And it's so funny, because we'll often then, we have to do work and go back and balance out their perception. So normally we go back to kind of root cause events where it's, there's like a negative emotion attached. It's like, let's work somatically with the negative emotion so we can balance out our perception on this bad event. But with a lot of those ones, we have to go back and actually process the positive emotion, the elation, so they can actually see the downside to it. And, I remember I had one guy, and he was just shocking on gambling, the punt, and we went back, and it was literally a poker machine one like I was talking about. And he remembered he was just so excited and so happy. He just won all this money. And then once we actually just worked through his elation and everything and calmed everything down, he realized, I won the money, but I was just fucking alone. Like, I was just sitting there with a bunch of old retired people. I had no one to really share that with. So maybe it wasn't this amazing a moment that I thought it was, because we create this strong positive association, which then we're always trying to chase. And so if we relate that back to meditation, people then get attached to it. Well, I've got to go and sit on that pillow so I can have that experience again, when all you're doing then is trying to escape the life that you were trying to improve through meditation by using meditation as an escape.
Yeah, well, that client of yours, he was sitting in that chair surrounded by that old people because he was trying to escape, or he was chasing something else. So he was in suffering in some form, sitting in that chair. And when he got $6,000, it was like, yay, I've got this. I am now. This made me happy. But he doesn't have that inherent happiness. So it actually created and conditioned and deepened and enabled him to stay in that pattern, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's the same with drugs. Then you're always trying to chase that happiness or the alleviation of suffering, and that you got for this short period of time at the start, and that becomes, it's like that's chasing the dragon is the term. You know, it's that's a thing that you'll never catch.
Yeah, but I don't think meditators or meditative teachers or something have helped people to meditate because they've made it so convoluted, or there's so many forms of it. You've got to do this, and you have to have this incense and this candle and this room and this time of day and blah blah blah. And they've made it too complex. They've put too many barriers and obstacles between it for people. So what we're trying to do with our meditation center is just one thing. It's come and sit in stillness. We're not doing any guided meditation. We're not doing any, and float on a cloud and release all of the blah. You know, it's going to be based in love and compassion, but it's, you got to come in and do the work. You know, it's, people will come in from their busy day, and so we'll start off with anapana. We'll start off with just focusing on the breath, just to hone the mind, bring it, ground yourself back in your body, come back to your being, and then just observe the sensations that will arise and fall. There'll be stimulus of a thought. You know, we can't stop our thoughts. We just learn to distance and move away from them. The thoughts are still going to be generating somewhere. It's like the clock ticking in the background. We just stop hearing the clock. So a lot of people think they have to meditate to stop their thoughts, which you're going to die. So
yeah. I mean, it's something that you won't achieve. And anyone who says, "Oh, we're going to teach you how to stop your thoughts," just run the other way. But the analogy of, like, I always think about it as like most people with their thoughts. It's like a dog, like a rabid dog, right in their face, just barking at them all the time. But as you get better, that dog sort of moves further away, and all of a sudden it's sort of a few blocks around the corner, and there's this faint little yap you can hear, but it doesn't distract you from the present moment.
Interesting segue. I had a client in a live meditation the other morning online, and he goes into a room at 5 to 6 and closes the door, but then he's got a wife and 2 kids in the house, and he's got a dog as well. And so I think this is his 3rd week into it. And in the past, the dog's been, I'm going to hit my microphone here, so just be careful. He can hear this dog scratching at his door. It's just this. And he said it used to be sort of like nails down the chalkboard. You know, he couldn't tolerate it. It triggered a stream of thoughts, and who's going to fucking get up and get the dog, and should I open the door? And it was just his settled mind, like he's been meditating, and his settled mind would just become so unsettled, so distorted and disturbed. But he said the other day he actually heard and he just sat there and he observed it, and he was like, all right, that's just the dog at the door. It'll go away. It's not going to keep going. It'll figure out that I'm not going to open the door, blah, blah, blah. If the family want to stop it, they'll stop it. They know what I'm doing. And just went through this split-second process, and it just returned back to his breath. And he said,
beautiful.
For him to develop that level of tolerance on a deep internal level, and a capacity just to observe things objectively without imposing his beliefs or what he thinks should or shouldn't be happening. He wasn't trying to change the reality. He wasn't trying to alter reality. which many people do. And I mean, you know, better than a lot of people do that through drug use. But every day people are trying to alter their reality and shapeshift it and change it. No, that shouldn't happen. No, this should be like that. Oh, I wish that would be different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that came up on our last show, that word tolerance. I think that's what it is. It's just being able to, instead of trying to manipulate reality, it's like how much more tolerant can we become? Because the noise, the scratching at the door, it's just a sound. Like there's sounds
Yeah.
going on all the time. It's just a sound. But then there's this, if we can't tolerate a sound, it doesn't mean you change it. It doesn't mean like if the dog is scratching and wants to come in, you can get up and let the dog in. But you either get up and let the dog in and go, hey, buddy, or you go, fucking hell, and you let the dog in and you're pissed off at the dog. It's the same sound.
So it's that external stimulus is dictating how you feel, which people are experiencing day in and out thousands of times a day. So doing this form of meditation helps you to remain more equanimous, calm and composed and just observing. And in that space, so when all of a sudden when we're not heightened, we're not going to turn up and be aggressive towards the dog. We're not going to be destructive in our nature. We're going to be compassionate and kind and loving. I had another client the other day say he fixes the power lines where after there's been an accident or whatever, and he turned up. He said in the past he'd get a message saying go to this job. There's police there, you know, there's fire or whatever, and his mind would start jumping to all these conclusions and worst case scenario, and it's going to be fucked, and this is going to be there. And so he, like AFL players, he'd played the game before he got there. You know, and so when he got there, he was in such a heightened state that when he'd have to deal with people, he'd be coming from this agitated state. And he said the other day he got this message, there's police there, and he felt the train trying to leave the station. And he's like, whoa, no, put the brakes on, pulled it back. He's like, don't you fucking dare leave. But he had the mindfulness and the awareness to detect that train of thought trying to leave. And then he had the skills to pull it back. And he just remained present and he turned up to the job. And the owner of the house was obviously in suffering. A tree had fallen on his house.
Yep.
So he's a bit pissed off. And he got and he's like, oh, it took you fucking ages to get there. You know, he's really agitated, really in my client's face. And my client said it was amazing. He just stood there and he saw this man's agitation as a form of suffering. Mm-hmm. And because he wasn't heightened when he got there, he went into compassion mode. And he reassured this man, it's going to be okay. Yes, we understand. Okay. Love, just oozing out of him. And he said within 10 minutes, this dude's nature had turned significantly to where he was like, oh, you guys are the best. Thanks so much. You know, does anyone want a beer or a cup of tea? Or is it, you know, I really appreciate you being here, guys. So
his presence and compassion changed the situation and changed the energy of that man.
But he could only achieve that through managing prior stimulus. You know, he didn't get there heightened.
Yeah, he'd been training that part, you know. I often even get people to start. It's like really easy, and because like you said, we're all rushing, which is, you know, cortisol and adrenaline. Like as a society, we're so addicted to cortisol and adrenaline and being in that sympathetic nervous system. And, you know, just for people to, and there's a real practical tip they can do right now, is just on your phone to set an alarm every hour. If you don't do it every hour, do it every couple of hours or a couple of times a day. And you simply just do what's called a 4-7-8 breath, which is really simple. Yeah, it's just inhaling through the nose deeply for 4 seconds and then holding for 7 seconds and then breathing very slowly out through the mouth or nose. It's easy probably to purse the lips and just... And what you do by making the out breath twice as long as the in breath, you start to come out of sympathetic into parasympathetic nervous system, which is more calm and relaxed. And I think if people have a trigger where they can just do that once an hour, and it's only do it a couple of minutes, do like 10 breaths of that, then we can start calming. Do it at the traffic lights.
Do it when you're driving. Exactly. You know, and that's the thing. We don't have to, with mental health, it's so different to physical health, and you don't have to allocate time and energy to it. Mental health is something that we can train all throughout our day. every second of every day, because there's always sources of stimulus. There's always going to be a message. Go to this job, there's police there. That's an opportunity to do a mental rep if your current pattern is to get into a heightened anxious state because you're jumping to conclusions and your mind gets distorted and bent out of shape. There's an opportunity to go, whoa, no. Come back. Gentle. Right. That's working on your mental health.
Yeah.
Going for a drive. Oh, red light. Thank you, red light. Now's an opportunity for me to take a breath in and an extra long breath out.
Yeah.
Okay. But then we start living in that gratitude. Thank you, red light. Thank you, person, for stopping and breaking down. I have an opportunity now. Everything's an opportunity.
Yeah. So that red light is an opportunity to get pissed off, or it's an opportunity to calm the nervous system and do those breaths. And then, like you said, after you do that a few times, then you welcome a red light, because then all of a sudden, when you do enough of these mental reps, which is your word that I love, it's that, all of a sudden, even if then you're like, but what if I'm already 5 minutes late to a meeting? You'll realize that being 10 minutes late to a meeting doesn't matter.
And that's the thing. I've been speaking to clients this week about our overinflated sense of self-importance. If I don't turn up, a meteorite will hit planet Earth. It's just, and I'm like, no. I got an email from the universe earlier saying you're fired. You're no longer the center of the universe. and they have a bit of a chuckle with that. But I love seeing clients' progression.
We picked someone else. It was you, but you fucked up, and we picked someone else to be the center of the universe.
You're abusing your power. You expected everyone to go at your pace from home to work, and then you're getting frustrated when there was roadwork. So you're out. You failed the test.
That on time one for me. So I had created a belief, and I honestly can't even remember where I heard it. I don't even think it was my parents. I think I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard somewhere that if you are late to meet someone, then it's the ultimate sign of arrogance because you're putting your time ahead of their time. And for some reason, I had this link between being on time or being late and being arrogant. And because I also had that coupled with the belief that everyone has to like me, right? Yeah. So now you can see where I'm going. So I would always be early. Even if I was running on time, I would start to get pissed off on the way to things because I'm like, there's a chance I could be late. And I would even, if there was unforeseen circumstances like a big breakdown or something happening with traffic, I would literally message people and say, hey, just letting you know I'm going to be 2 to 3 minutes late. And like, exactly. Like that's how and that's how bent out of shape we can get because we combine a few of these weird beliefs.
Yeah, and so that's so normal. Yeah, that's just so many people would resonate with that or something similar. But to me, that's unnecessary suffering.
It's so unnecessary.
We don't require that because, and that's what I mean. When I can see how my clients are tracking and progressing. At the start, they'll say, "This is how I was," and 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I'll get a text message. Hi, Nick. Stuck in traffic. Get there when I can.
Yeah.
And they'll turn up and they won't be in a heightened state. They won't be all panicky. They won't be all, oh God. They'll actually turn up and go, I'm glad I don't care if you like me or not. And I'm like, whoa, awesome. I said, there's a balance. You can't go from one end of the spectrum to the other. You can't be over caring and then absolutely no fucks at all. It's just, it's a balancing act, but it's a beautiful thing.
It's the middle way, which if we come back to Buddhism again, it's the middle way. It's not pinging and ponging between two extremes, and that can be with any behavior or mindset.
In the middle way, there is going to be an ebb and a flow, but it's if the middle is 0 and to the left is -10 and to the right is +10, you're not going to those extremes. You're not going to that end of the spectrum. You're just going between a 2 and a 3 and a -2 and a 3. It's just that gentle ebb and flow. I think Einstein said, balance isn't being perfectly still. It's like riding a bicycle. You got to keep. You're
constantly readjusting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to keep the thing straight. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. That's good because it's a choice. Like now, like for me, it's also one, not caring if I'm late, but then also if I get there and I have to wait 10 minutes for someone to rock up, then you can just sit there and just like look around the cafe and then just take in what's happening. Look at that. You might meet, you start chatting to someone else, and it's just a very different experience of that real agitated, anxious state that a lot of people find
But
themselves in.
you can only create that behavior when you're not giving the key to your happiness to other people, and you give the key to your happiness to other people when you have an attachment to a belief that people should be there in time.
Yeah,
So
that's the swear word. Should be.
yeah, our irrational mind is what's creating our suffering, not the person turning up late. In Buddhism, they talk about the source of all suffering is attachment to that belief, but it's also ignorance. I've got no idea what's happening to this other person. They could be, in an Al Qaeda video on Hezbollah or something. They could have got kidnapped. I don't know. I am ignorant to such a huge degree. I cannot possibly know. So therefore, I'm not going to impose my beliefs and my judgments and my biases, and I'm not going to criticize and condemn and blame and, oh, you fucked my whole day.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to sit there and have a conversation with someone.
And we choose that because we don't want to unnecessarily suffer, but we unconsciously choose unnecessary suffering so much of the time.
But when we let go of our attachment and we sit in our ignorance with an acceptance that we don't know, it liberates our mind. So all of a sudden we have that freedom just to sit there and to adapt and to be flexible. The bamboo, instead of being rigid, problem-oriented, fixed mindset, concrete, have to, should, must, need, attached, craving. Ugh, I nearly felt sick just saying all that. It's sitting there and present, calm, composed, compassion, love, gratitude, empathy, flexibility, adapting, going with the flow. It's solution oriented. Okay, well, this problem has arisen in my day. I'm a human being. When I was becoming a fetus, I signed up to this. To be human is to going to experience suffering. It's the first of the noble truths. So, here it is. It's arisen today. Okay. Well, what am I going to do with this? Nothing. I don't need to do anything with it. It just is.
I was just imagining this little fetus, like, how they're
Yeah,
all
with a
curled up,
pen.
little jelly bean trying to write a contract.
Well,
Doesn't even know its name yet. So it's just like fetus.
Is that a capital F, Mr. Fetus? Is an F or a PH?
Are you like Madonna? What's your second name? It's just fetus.
But I'm being cool. It's 2020, so I'm going with the PHETUS.
PH fetus.
But I love thinking about this stuff. And in my course today, they were talking about how we don't spend enough time doing deep thinking because we're so go, speedboat across the surface. But I do love thinking about a fetus, or no, spirit, sorry, in the waiting room. So whether you believe it or not, just run with it. We've got incarnations, different lives, reincarnation. Yeah, so this organic thing that my energy has attained is going to die. It's dying at the moment. Yeah, so when this organic body dies, my energy will go somewhere else. Yeah, so I don't actually die. I was watching a Ram Dass lecture the other day, and come to my house to party, people. It's awesome. And he was talking about someone else, and he was dying of cancer, and they're like, no, all his devotees were saying to this guru, no, but you can heal yourself. You can heal yourself. He's like, don't leave us. And he's like, leave? Where would I go? It's like, he said it was like stepping out of a Cadillac, and everyone going, no, don't leave the Cadillac. He's like, but it's just a thing. I'm still going to be here, just in a different form.
Part of the process.
Yeah,
it's the funny thing. It's like when someone it dies and you'll see someone who's dead. They'll say it like you imagine if you haven't seen it in real life, like on TV shows and that, and the person's in hospital, and then the doctor will just look at the family and go, he's gone. And it's like that physical body looks exactly the same as it did a minute ago, but he's gone. Everyone gets that. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, what's he and where did he go? And it's like, so we all kind of intuitively know that we're not the physical body, you know, because I remember even Disco, my puppy, when he died in my arms, and it's like he's gone. You know, it's like he's physically this same beast here, but he is gone. But then all of a sudden, if you start to say to people, well, his spirit or soul or whatever left, they're like, oh, that's a bit woo woo kind of thing. But we all understand that there's the he that's gone or the she that's gone is not the body.
Well, I'm sitting here looking at Polly at the end of my couch. Hello, Smooch.
Polly.
And looking at her, and she's 8 now, and she's arthritis and all that sort of stuff. So her this body that she's inhibited,
inhabited,
yeah, just all one letter there. This body that she's inhabited is going to go away soon, and I'm obviously going to grief to some degree, but I'm not going to get stuck in that grief and create unnecessary suffering by letting the ego come into play and go, I miss her. Look what I'm missing. I can't believe she's gone. I can't believe she's dead. It's all about me. It's not actually about her.
Mm.
So when she does leave, and I love, this is why the Stoics really meditated on death. You know, memento mori, and you too will die, because yeah, I'm not going to be able to touch her, but she's still going to be around me somewhere. Like Disco with you, he's still there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like at the end of the day, we're kind of we become. You were talking about sort of our concept of time, and I can't believe it's so and so already, and we kind of just become this collection of memories, kind of thing. You know, because it's only we're only existing right now in this moment, but we have these obviously maybe ideas of the future, but also just these ideas of the past, and you know, even those ideas of the past are so, you know, distorted. There's a book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's pretty dense, but it's a really good book. But one of the big things I took out of that, which I explained to people, then this is once again with people who have get addicted to positive experiences, because we have sort of these two selves. We have our, I don't know if I've spoken about this on the show before, but there's our experiencing self and our remembering self, right? So there's the us who, as we're doing something, is having an experience, and then there's also the remembering us. So I'll look back on that experience, and those two often have very, very different views. They're stored quite differently in our brain. So what happens, we store peak or low experiences much more than equanimous experiences. So the good example of this is, let's say that I got a couple of kids and we're going to Disneyland, right? And I go to Disneyland, and my experiencing self of that day, it's not a great day. Like things are really like overly priced. We're waiting in lines the majority of the day. The kids are fucking getting impatient, annoying, and like I get to the car at the end of the day, and I'm like, thank fuck we got to the car at the end of the day. Like I'm so glad that's over. That's my experiencing self. Now then, a few months down the track or whenever, people ask me how Disneyland was. What happens, we'll only remember peak experience. So I'll remember when I'm on the roller coaster with my son, or we saw that really, really cool player, we met Goofy or whatever. So I'll go, that was such a great day, right? But my experiencing self was like struggling in that day, but my remembering self actually went, wow, what a fantastic day.
Is that... I think it was Rumi. Who was the dude that did the doco and he was shagging all the
Osho.
birds? Osho. Was it Osho that said we don't suffer the past? The past doesn't exist. What we're suffering is our memory of things, and we're not suffering anxiety because the future doesn't exist. We're just we're suffering our imagination of what could potentially happen.
Yes.
To that effect. So when we go back to Disneyland, if we have an attachment to a belief that the kids should have done that, and I've paid all this money and it should have been a good day, are we not going to then go into ruminating over the negatives?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those peaks, they're not only positive, but what they could be perceived to be negative as well.
Yeah, they are. I think both of those peaks and the troughs get encoded into memories more, but it seems like these peak ones seem to override it, because I see it a lot with
Well, why is depression so prevalent then? Why?
because depression is I have a fantasy in my mind of what my life should look like,
Yeah.
based on I think peak experiences in the past where I want to stay in that state. So then I can't live up to that fantasy, so I'm depressed.
Well, but the people ruminate over a day like Disneyland, and they'll replay it in their head. And many people, because they're one of those cognitive distortions, they'll disqualify the positives, so they'll only focus on the negatives. And so when their mind is taken aback, that when they see a Mickey Mouse doll or something triggers that memory, their recall will go back to all the negatives of it, and they'll go, "Oh, that was fucking the worst day ever." I can't believe.
So I suppose with Disneyland, I suppose that if there's more of a hum of negativity, but the peaks are really high, we'll remember that as a positive experience.
Well, I think it's the version that goes to Disneyland. So the experiencer, if they're going there with attachments to a desired outcome, and so the reality of what they experience is different to the reality of what they expect to happen, then it's going to become a negative stored memory.
Yeah.
And that's where they'll ruminate on it.
Of course, but then most people are unconscious, so they just all we have to pull on all our memories.
Not our listeners; they're woke blokes.
No, we got the woke folks. Woke folks.
Woke folks.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Non-binary.
It was interesting, and I was reading a book recently. I've been doing a bit of a deep dive into Peter Levine, who's the creator of somatic experiencing.
How's Peter feel about that?
Peter feels great about.
You're diving deep into him.
He's hurting. He's having to take those short but deep breaths,
Straight from the Rhine.
He's having his most somatic experience of his whole life.
Oh dear.
And one of his books is Trauma and Memory, and he was actually citing the some of the latest research on memory, and it's like we don't so much have a file in a filing cabinet that we draw on as a memory each time, but as something triggers a memory or we start to recall something, our mind creates the memory kind of all afresh again and new. Yeah, so these memories are kind of being recreated over and over, and this is great news for people like us who help people reframe memories. But it's not so much we're pulling on an old file out of the drawer, where we're recreating that memory again in the now.
But we're not recreating a carbon copy of it, because it's been passed through all our biases and all our filters. So that's why in trials in courts now, witness testimonials are getting thrown out because they're not actually recollecting what the reality of what did happen. They're recalling their reality of what happened.
Yeah, and especially in a highly intense emotionally situation, then memory is less and less reliable. That's why whenever the police rock up to a crime scene, they separate the witnesses straight away, because if one witness talks to the other, they'll be like, this happened, no, that happened, then that one will change their mind as to what happened because that one said so. So it's very easy to influence people when they're in that heightened state.
That's why I ask clients to bring their partners into sessions, because I don't want just my client's version of events. Like turning up to a crime scene, I want to interview as many people as I can to get the actual picture. He's going to recall this. It was a red T-shirt. It was an orange T-shirt. It was a blue T-shirt. It was a red T-shirt. It was a red T-shirt. All right. Evidence suggests it was probably a red T-shirt. So I want to reduce my ignorance, so I'm in a better position to then help that person. So having the client's partners come in, it's amazing. Because it creates a bit of accountability for the client first and foremost. It gets them out of their comfort zone, but it also, the partners get to put a name to the face or a face to the name, and get to see sort of what we're up to, and they get to ask questions, and they get to, so it's a more well-rounded approach, I think.
Yeah, that's 100%. I agree. That's what we did at the centre, had family support sessions just to work on the issues that the family or partner had around it as well, because that's going to help the overall situation. But yeah, just to gather more and more information, because yeah, I used to have, you'd have a client and they'd talk about their partner or whatever, and then they'd be coming in a couple of weeks just for that support session. And based on the information I'd gotten, I expected some three-headed monster to walk through the door who was going to spit fire at me and just burn the whole place down. And this lovely person walks through the door, and they have a very, very different opinion of certain events that happen in the relationship. And then it's known neither of them are right. Objectivity will sit somewhere around here, but at least you can understand where the different perspectives are. And that's why there's so much conflict. I mean, it's not so much two people in conflict, it's just two sets of beliefs and ideas about
two
the
value
past.
systems are different.
Exactly.
And you're not saying the client's not telling the truth. They're telling their truth. They're telling their version of events. So they're not lying. They're just giving us the information that they've stored based
because
on.
no one can know the truth.
No.
And this once again comes back to this theme that we keep it's coming up quite a lot in our podcast now, of just not knowing and being comfortable sitting in that space of not knowing. Because like I have my subjective truth, which is what I believe to be true for me with whatever happened. Like even I can get off this podcast today and I've got an idea of what this podcast was about, but then you'll have an idea. They're different, and both of them are different to objectively what happened. And every single person that listens to this podcast will have their subjective experience of it, and they're all different, right?
Totally.
And we'll never get to that. We'll never know that objective truth.
Well, a great experiment to do is read a book. So the Four Agreements from Don Miguel, and then read the book next year, and it's going to read completely differently because you're a different person. Mm-hmm. So it's not you that's reading it. Every morning a version of is born, and you and I are not going to wake up tomorrow. We're going to go to sleep, and a new version of us will wake up after all the processing is done, and after all the breaking down and rebuilding, and cells are regenerating, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's the man cannot stand in the same river twice sort of philosophy.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, yeah. Just back to the dog thing. I just had this memory came up, and grief with disco. Yeah, I had this really interesting experience while we were over here. I had a dream, such a vivid dream. So this was a few months ago. So it would have been. Disco died like late last year. So I had this dream probably 9 to 10 months after he passed away. And I went through this, and this is how so much grief can be unconscious as well. And I grieved at the time, and I did the best I could with my tools and, worked through, and I was a mess for a few days and then went into gratitude. And then anyway, I'd only sort of felt fondly about him since then, and the memories we shared, and knowing, like we said, that he's still around. Then all of a sudden, 9 to 10 months after, I was in the house we're in now in Thailand, and I had this extremely vivid dream. And I was at this giant shopping center with Disco, and we we're just moving around the shopping center, like going from shop to shop, up and down the levels. It was like multi-level, and it was kind of like a storybook of his life. Like he was this energetic puppy, and then as he went to the next level, he was a bit older and blah, blah, blah. And we were going through, and I sort of obviously had no idea what was happening because I was in this dream. And then all of a sudden we kind of got to the top of this shopping center, and there was like a hallway with a dead end, and he'd ran forward to this dead end and just sat staring at the white wall. And I was just calling. I'm just like, Disco, 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 and just wouldn't turn around. And then next to me, it was like, I don't know if it was Jordan Peterson or Gabor Mate, or it was like, but it would have been like the avatar of some person, knowledgeable person or whatever. Mm. And they just looked at me and said, go to him, you know what's happening. And then in that moment, like I knew he was dying, and I ran down to the end of the hallway, and he like went limp in my arms. Like he had 9 to 10 months earlier. And I just started wailing, like in this dream, crying. And then I woke myself up because I was actually wailing and yelling at his name in bed. Luckily, Melissa was upstairs with Tommy putting him to sleep. And I ended up staying awake for about, it's hard to tell because I didn't check my phone or anything, but well over an hour, possibly a couple of hours, just crying. Just crying about his death. And it was just an interesting experience that I'd been through this initial grieving process in this very unconscious through a dream. Next process had come up and obviously needed to be released as well.
How beautiful.
It was beautiful, yeah. It was so painful at the time, but then ever since then, it's like I've just gone to this whole new sort of, gratitude whenever I think of him.
Two things. I keep trying to reinforce with clients that there's no good or bad or right or wrong. We're going to get off this binary thinking. There's just pros and cons to things. There's just everything is just different, and it's very difficult to, if you can't accept that there's pros and cons, if you're only addicted to the pros or the positive experiences, then you're fucked. So if it's hard to see that a con is going to turn into a pro. Yeah, but with bushfires, it's terrible while it's happening, but the pro is that there's rejuvenation and regeneration and everything. So the con is obviously disco dying, but the pro is that you had that experience and you've deepened your gratitude or something. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a great example, a beautiful example of how we need to live within an acceptance of the reality of all, not just the reality of what we want to happen because it feels good.
Exactly.
And I had another thought with that. I'll come back to it. I was back to the ignorance thing. So I was watching watching a discourse this morning, and they were talking about oncologists, working in hospitals, and they're sending them on meditation retreats now. And so many of them are having these deep healing experiences. They're coming into this deep state of grief because they're too busy to deal with all the deaths of the patients they're working with. It's just this one died, right, next one, and then they go home, drink a bottle of wine, get up to work, do another 14-hour day, blah, blah, blah. And so they're not actually taking time to process things. Mm-hmm. So going on these retreats, like you, they're just meditating, stopping, slowing down, then bang, it's like you're drilling down, you hit the well, and she all just erupts and bursts. Yeah. And you're coming out of it having such a cathartic experience.
Yeah, well, I suppose, that's really, really interesting. I'm glad they're doing that. But that's because I think, once again, that being a system that we have and an oncology department of a hospital, and the people, dying all the time, is probably unnatural for, our evolution. I suppose if we were in a tribe, then people would die, but you wouldn't see people dying every single day. Yeah. It's like in the army, which you've been in, like going and killing other people that you don't know because you're ordered to is very unnatural for our human wiring. And so it's like, we'll train you to do this and then go and do that, and then come back to normal, in air quotes here, on doing life. And that's why so many vets run into issues, because you've done something very, very unnatural to the human organism. And then you're like, we'll just go back and deal with it. And it's very, very hard to deal with because it is so unnatural.
Yeah, and you think of it a theatre of war or a theatre of a hospital, you're exposed to more death. You're exposed to more trauma, things that you get conditioned to it a little bit, but you never really get conditioned to it.
But that's kind of a trauma response to to desensitize yourself.
Well, that's why there's black humor in it. That's why fire is in Ambos and military. They use this dark black humor as a coping mechanism.
My ex-wife, her old man was with the MFB for many years. Great man. But so I was a tradie back then, so did a lot of work with his mates doing air conditioning and heating stuff. So I was around fireys a lot, and that just very dark humor. And I would talk about. He said, there's, yes, we have. We can speak to a psychologist if we wanted, but it's still very boys' club, and that isn't taken up a lot. But that's the way we deal with things. Is so they have names like that. The crispy one we found yesterday, or something like that. And so it's just they're
trying to create that detachment from it, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. Which I think I often think, well, what is the evolutionary purpose of things. So I'm like, well, I always think, why do we laugh? Like, why do we have humor? But I think it is evolutionary to get us through very, very difficult situations that in other ways we wouldn't be able to get through.
Mm.
Because it makes no sense for our survival. Otherwise, why we laugh?
Well, I mean, it's a basic human need. That sense of fun. It creates a chemical
Connection,
reaction.
you think?
Yeah, it's
Like
just that.
laughing with another person creates a
Well,
connection?
it's lightness. It's I always look at things in terms of yin and yang. So you can't have the dog without dog shit sort of philosophy. You can't appreciate the light you can't have light without dark. You can't appreciate the lovely days spent with family without the lonely days spent in isolation, sort of thing.
Yep.
So it creates a sense of balance and gratitude. So I think laughing is probably the counterbalance for sadness, unhappiness.
And this comes back to what we were talking about around the trying to always chase those peak experiences. And it's like, let's say, like I was a drug addict, and it's like one of the first times that I took ecstasy, one of the first times I used methamphetamine, and and it's like, wow, that was the most amazing feeling in the world. I just want to stay there forever. But then if you actually did stay there forever, which is impossible, but let's just say that you could, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like, there'd be no reference point, so that actually wouldn't feel good anymore, because now
Yeah.
you'd have nothing to compare it to. You'd have no
Oh,
low to compare the high to.
I was just writing about that in my studies. It was dukkha is suffering in Sanskrit, and that's another reason why so many people have an aversion to meditation, because there's Sanskrit and Pali and English and all these different languages and words that you got to get your head around. Anyway, I do digress. So dukkha is suffering, but sukha is the opposite. It's a state of really happiness, and they were saying, it's great to achieve this constant state of sukha. And I was like, but is it? And isn't it an oxymoron? Because if you're craving sukha, aren't you in dukkha?
Yeah.
So it's
And I even love how close those words are. It's just that the letters different, because
so it's sort of like that conversation we had when I realized that living is dying and dying is living. They're not mutually exclusive. They're one and the same thing. So I think dukkha and sukha are the same. They're one and the same thing.
yeah. I thought you were going to say having a sukkah.
So watching this Ram Dass lecture the other day, and I mean the dude's on a trip. I love watching his stuff, and he's talking about how he's left India and he's gone to America, and he feels he needs to go back and see his guru Maharaji, and Maharaji comes through in a vision and says, no, you're going to get your teachings in America. So he's like, okay, fine. How's this going to happen? And then blah, blah, blah. Turns out he goes and he gets taken to this woman in New York. What are the ghettos in New York?
The Bronx.
Yeah, the Bronx or somewhere around there. And he said it's just this like middle-aged Jewish woman, and all of a sudden she's got this spiritual stuff. She's only looking out of her third eye. She's sitting in like a rock. They can't keep her down. She keeps getting high. And he's talking about all these stories, like she's cooking, and he's on the phone to her, and he's like, "What are you cooking?" She's like, "Oh, hang on." She keeps having to look out her third eye because she's not actually using her physical eyes, and so I'm cooking meat. Oh, what's that funny sound? Oh, I forgot to use a pan. Like, this is how high she is. So she's trying to function down here on this plane, but she's on this completely different plane most of the time, trying to run a family. And then all of a sudden, he'll be on the phone.
What the fuck was she cooking on? Just a flame?
I don't know. And she'll be speaking from Socrates or something. She'll be teaching Ram Dass something so deep and important. Then he'll hear this, "Mom, where's my underwear?" And she'll have to come down again and go, "Sorry, you what? Where's my underwear? Oh, it's in the top drawer somewhere." And then off she'll float back up in this other plane.
Yeah.
And I was sitting on the couch at work, and a client walked in for his session, and I pissed himself laughing. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm watching this Ram Dass," and explained who he was. And we get in and had the session. And I'm like, I love watching stuff sitting in ignorance and in an acceptance of my ignorance. Like, just with an open mind, with a
Mm.
playfulness. And I think, I can't remember who said it, but, and I'm not saying I am this, but the sign of emotional intelligence is the capacity to play around with an idea without taking it on,
Mm.
or without rejecting it. We can just play around with this concept, this idea. And so that's what I found myself doing with this Ram Dass story. And I'm like, who am I to say this is bullshit? Who am I to say that this didn't actually occur? Who am I? I mean, from a therapeutic perspective, you're sitting there going, he's touching on a mental illness here. Is this schizophrenia popping up here, or is this, is this bipolar, or is this borderline personality disorder? I'm trying to find a label for it on some level.
Yeah.
But then I got rid of that, and I just sat in and I listened, and I was like, who are we to say that this didn't happen? Because we are so deeply ignorant. We cannot see. We have no idea if there's other planes and other dimensions and all that shit.
Yeah.
It was beautiful just to sit there and to watch this and listen to this story just with a real playfulness, and that was awesome. I didn't decide whether it happened or didn't happen.
No, but it's fun to listen to, and like you said, it's fun to visualize and play with that idea. But no, I've met people who are definitely on different planes.
But
It's
Western psychology would call that psychosis.
Yeah, whereas other people would call it, the
Enlightened.
shaman, enlightened. What
Enlightened.
do they say? The mystic and the psychotic are in the same waters, but the mystic just learned how to swim. So very, very similar. But what lady I'm working with at the minute, she talks about we spoke about Polly inhabiting her body, but she speaks about cohabiting. So it's like we want to cohabit. It's like we want to get in touch with this deeper part of ourselves, whether you call that spirit, soul, or whatever it is, and maybe touch these higher planes and everything. But we also need to cohabit in the reality of living as a human being, because that's what we're here to be, human beings.
Yeah.
That's that fetus signing that contract. The contract was, I'm going to be a human. I'm going to suffer.
I'm on a human plane.
I'm going to have a job, and I'm probably going to have family or whatever it is. So it's like I'm
going to have goggles on. I'm going to have blinkers on. I'm not going to be able to see so much, but I'm going to know on some level that it's all there and it all exists. But I'm not going to be able to see it.
Yeah. So if I can cohabit both of those, and that's a process I'm trying to learn at the minute, then we cannot get stuck either way. We cannot get attached to everything happening in this human form that has to be a certain way, but then we can also not get attached. And this is, that spiritual bypassing, or whatever you want to call it, just getting attached to escaping into my third eye or other planes all the time, and I'm not using a pan to cook my meat.
In Buddhism, they call that going into that deep place is the collective consciousness. It's the consciousness of everything, and it's the interconnectedness. It's where we're all in the same bath together, and we're not different. We are all one in that bath. So,
yeah. I've been thinking quite a bit about collective unconscious and collective trauma and that lately. Because it's like we do, like for me, I started thinking about it being Australian, and I was doing sort of some deep inquiry into myself, and I was thinking there's definitely this collective unconscious trauma for me. Like I've never ever in my life been mean to an Aboriginal person, ever in my life. Yet I find there's this part of me, and I have to really go within to find it, but I can see whenever I'm around someone Aboriginal, that I have a little bit of guilt around them. Like there's something that I've done wrong to them, right? And
I get the same thing. Like Australia Day, I feel very empathetic towards that. So is that a collective consciousness thing, or is that just an empath thing, perhaps? Is that or is it both? Who knows?
You're right, exactly. It could be one, either, both. It's
nothing.
It's interesting, because
it's great to play around with it.
Yeah, because I've known people even from Germany and Russia. I found there seems to be just some real, because if you talk about traumatized humans, like traumatized countries, the last 100 years, Germany and Russia are very traumatized countries, and
you think
you pick
chuck the Jews in there as well, will you?
Exactly. So I think there is a lot of collective
and African Americans.
Yes, 100%.
And South Africans. That collective consciousness, I've never done one, but I've heard of these global meditations. And I think, if I'm correct, and I'd love a listener to help me to be less ignorant by sending us an email or something. But I think the purpose of those collective worldwide let's all meditate at the same time is to heal that collective
Yeah,
consciousness.
yeah, yeah. When they have done that in certain cities with enough people, the crime will drop. A
Yeah,
significant
right.
amount. Yeah, so they did it. The few studies I've read, I can't remember where it was, but they did in different towns. So now, obviously, I know there's people like I think Dr. Joe Dispenza and other people were trying to online. So like you're like a global community
Mm,
together. But,
mm,
but in the past, it's been in person,
mm.
thousands and thousands of people all sitting in a certain city, and they've crime will drop for that time because they're all getting down with an intention for peace. Well, that's the intention. So if everyone sits down with a common intention, it can affect like the energy of that surrounding area. But the problem is, as soon as they stop, that crime went back to normal.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
it's
like
that
people would need to maintain that energy, which is kind of how we started this conversation around meditation, not just being while you're meditating, but being in your life. But you need enough people with that intention constantly, I suppose, to reduce violence and crime.
I read fantasy books because I've got a very vivid imagination, and as we know, in the past, my imagination made me housebound. So now I'm using my imagination for good instead of evil.
Ah, so what
Um,
was it? The imagination in of itself wasn't bad or evil.
no, no, it was
Ah,
just
right.
the way it was getting up to things. And so I read a lot of fantasy books and other worlds and magic, not the sci-fi, but the more the fantasy ones. Ursula Le Guin, Robin Hobb, David Gemmell, Raymond Feist, all these, and they're the storytellers, and they're amazing. And I find I'm reading a book, and all of a sudden I'll disappear, and I can't remember turning the pages. I can't remember reading the lines. It's playing as a movie in my head. And that thing you said of they need to do it the whole time. There was a story of a city that was shrouded in a cloak of invisibility to protect itself, but it took a lot of magicians within that city to constantly keep that bubble up. And unfortunately, these people used to kill people and use blood to keep it going. But yeah, it's imagine if we had imagine if it was a job. You're a meditator, and your job is to keep the collective consciousness in a state of equanimity. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, that would be well. That's like people
It's a
like
form of new industry.
the Dalai Lama and people like that. I mean that's someone who would I imagine radiate that peaceful energy for God knows how
Yeah,
many
but it's not
people.
sustained. That's why we need a dedicated group of people continually doing it in shifts. It's just that after work, where are we going? I'm just going to meditate. I got a 2 hour shift coming up. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
I got some peace to create.
Yeah, me and Dave in Oregon, we're on.
It's
Um,
our shift. It's our time.
yeah, but once again, in the study we're talking about, and we're talking about how does mindfulness heal, and it comes down to that meditation increases empathy and compassion. Um, so, all the studies and research on complaining, they can show that it actually damages the brain. So complaining, we give ourselves brain damage when we complain. Every time we complain, it's like we're damaging our own brain. So the meditating is a way of healing the brain. The mind, which is separate to the brain, the mind starts healing the brain through just the observing and as I said before, that liberated mind
Hmm.
um, can create a healing in the brain and grow the brain, or the what are they called? The between the neurons, the
Well,
huh?
it's so important for people to know that they can, no matter how old you are listening to this, that you can actually change the shape of your brain. It's not this set organ. And one of the most
Totally.
famous studies was out of Harvard, which was where they had people do just 26 minutes a day of mindfulness exercises because they did fMRI, which is um, magnetic resonance image, functional magnetic resonance images, which is shows the brain, the best
Yeah.
technology we have. And they took people who'd been meditating like yogis and that kind of thing, and they had very different brain structures from your average Joe. But then they kind of were like, well, we need to create a study because there could be many other factors the yogi was doing. Could have been better diet, there could have been
Mm.
exercising, whatever. So they took people who had done little to no experience with mindfulness, took their brain scans at the start, and then after 8 weeks of doing 26 minutes a day, scanned their brains again. And the two significant changes were an increase in grey matter, increase inside of the hippocampus, which is in charge of critical thinking and memory and all the good stuff. More importantly, the amygdala, which is that the old part of the brain, which is in charge of our fight or flight, anxiety,
the alarm system, the alarm bell,
that shrunk in size. So it's like you were talking about causing yourself brain damage from complaining. On the other end, who wouldn't want to take that walnut-shaped part of the brain that's in charge of stress and shrink that motherfucker a little bit?
Yeah, blast that shit down. It was the dendrites between two between two neurons increasing. So yeah, we that's how our mind grows. That's that neuroplasticity. So that's what I'm trying to doing the mental reps, come out of that destructive thinking, let go of your attachments, and go into constructive thinking, as you're literally rewiring your brain. It's creating a different electrical pulse. It's good stuff, isn't it?
That's beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. What do we got on next week? We got a guest?
We do have a guest. We have Glenn Poole, the president, I think, of the Australian Men's Health Forum. So, yeah, well, I just came across them and thought, I'm ignorant again. I want to become more learned, and so let's get the dude on and have a chat and see what they're doing at the Australian Men's Health Forum and see what they're all about.
Nice. Sounds good. Something I was going to ask as well, maybe we can talk about it next week, but I was going to ask you, I found, because Melbourne, you guys just down there have just come out of, or had lockdown eased the last couple of days. And I don't know for you, but I've had a lot of people reaching out just to book in some sessions from Melbourne. Funnily enough, now that everyone's been waiting for lockdown to end, and now it kind of is, and I think there's a little bit of anxiety and stress and everything about going back to some sort of normal life or getting back out there in social situations or that kind of thing. Have you found that?
No, I'm still probably dealing with people that were stuck in their suffering from being in lockdown. So we're still unpacking and changing all those things. So
it's an interesting one, because I think while in lockdown, that the narrative has been kind of fear, don't go out because you'll fuck things up. And now there might be some associations around these normal activities of going out to cafes or restaurants or social things, but there might be a bit of fear attached there as well. It's interesting.
There's going to be awkwardness. We went down Main Street the day the restrictions eased, or the next day when we could, and it was like walking to a zombie movie. Everyone was like staring at the sun going, what is that thing? They were looking at each other just going, oh, what? There's more of us? Who are you? What are you doing? And it was fucking chockers. The Main Street was rams. There was just, and just these people was walking around blinded by the sun, bumping into each other. Oh, zombie. Need shopping, need a new t-shirt, need to spend money, need this, need to, I've got to distract myself.
How funny.
Yeah, it was classic. Very funny.
Strange times.
All right, man. Well, I'm going to go and have some lunch before I have my next study session.
Congrats on the move, everyone. Nick's moved into a new house this week, which is very, very exciting. If you're on YouTube, you can see that. And look what arrived in the mail for me.
Oh my goodness.
The 8 Master Lessons of Nature.
Oh, when did you begin it?
Ferguson. I'm currently on a book which I'm going to digest, but I reckon in a week or two I'll get cracking on it.
Hey, love it. I can't wait. Let's unpack that. Let's spend a whole podcast on that book. Okay. I was chatting with a client yesterday. I say that sentence so much. I was chatting with a client. Of course I was. But we were talking about how long they were listening to the podcast, and they said they had to keep rewinding it because it would say something that would trigger a train of thought for them, and then they'd, oh shit, I didn't hear what they've been talking about, so they'd have to rewind it. And I said, I think that's such a compliment, because I think a good, stimulating, engaging podcast or book or whatever, a 60-minute podcast should take you a couple of hours to listen to, because you need to digest it.
Yeah, well, that quote I brought up from Carl Jung earlier, I heard that I was at the gym and listening to a podcast while I was working out, and yeah, the I was a Paul Chek podcast, and he brought that up. And yeah, it was one I heard. It was. I'm like, oh fuck! I'm like, rewind 15 seconds, listen to it again, listen to it, and then I paused the podcast and didn't listen to anything for the rest of my workout because I just wanted to
chewing on that for a bit,
chewing on that idea. And I think that's so important. You know, like it's you don't want to just skim over things. And there's been
that's where you're not the speedboat just skimming along the surface. You're actually diving in deeply into it.
Exactly. Yeah. And funny enough, the book that I'm reading now, before I jump into the 8 Master Lessons of Nature, is about meta learning, so kind of the art of learning itself. So being able to not just skim over information and just be able to actually think about things properly and methodically and yeah, like we've said, not just skim over the top and jump on to the next thing. Because yeah, I've had some podcasts that I've listened to, and yeah, I've listened to the same podcast maybe 5 times because I'm like, there's just so much in there to digest. So yeah, that's the ultimate compliment. I love that.
Yeah, I started reading Buddhism Plain and Simple, I think it was, or Buddhism for Beginners, just to find something to refer to clients. And I can only get through 2 or 3 pages. And it takes me an hour to get through a couple of pages because I'm underlining and I'm writing it down. I'm like, what? Really? How do I apply that? And how do I? Because you want to absorb it and assimilate all of that knowledge so you can turn it into wisdom. You can live and breathe what it is. It's osmosis.
We had the discussion earlier. You said like you read the 4 agreements, then you read it again later because you're a different person. I years ago, when I was first sort of getting into everything, and I'd read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, a very famous book. And I'm like, oh, what a great book, and blah, blah. Then a year or so later, I'm like, oh, I'll revisit that book. And I remember I was laying in bed one night. I'd go to bed about 9:30, read for half an hour or so. And I read just this one passage of the book. And I couldn't get past it. And it was something to do with around, you know, the voice in your mind and everything. And then I kept having an idea about what I just read, but that was the voice that he was talking about. and I got caught
in the loop.
I got caught in this loop. And then all of a sudden, I had, it's like this break, and I just pissed myself laughing. And I couldn't stop laughing, and then I couldn't sleep. It was this epiphany, and I could not sleep. And I remember I got up and Disco was up, and I took him to the park at like 2:30 in the morning and walked him around the park just laughing still because I just couldn't sleep because I was just so excited about this epiphany and this funny loop that had gone on. And it was just this one line that I'd read before but never read it kind of in that way. So yeah, that was funny.
It was the similar experience when that dead bird taught me that life and death are one and the same thing, and my mind was just blowing. It was like a volcano, and I just, every person I came into contact with, I'm like, do you realize? Oh God, it's just that mind blown. It's just that epiphany. It's just because you're coming into that raw truth, that raw logic of it, and the simplicity of that tiny little kernel is enough to satisfy you more than a whole cob of corn. You know, it's just that one little kernel. It's just like, because it's so nourishing.
You sort of, you get the truth, but then you directly experience the truth. I think that's what blows the lid off. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. They're one and the same thing. It's like Zoolander when he's looking in the mirror. He's like, who am I? I guess I've got a lot to ponder. What's left to ponder?
Wrap it up.
All right, man.
Go and get some food, mate. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
We'll see you all next week with Glenn Poole.
Yes.
Excellent.
All right. Peace out.
Peace.